Good morning. Welcome to another lecture in advanced networking. So, in the previous week, we discussed about switches and switching networks, and we are going to continue that discussion today and then further go into how we can configure our switches to various set of network needs and some considerations and some troubleshooting associated with that. So, when we say we are configuring switches, before going into the switch configuration, let's go further into the discussion about how we establish these switch networks and what are some of the various different types of switches that we may encounter, and then go into the details of how these various switches can be configured. So let's start with something that we briefly touched upon last week as well, about what is sort of the uh, various ways or like various methods that we can design these networks, particularly at layer 2 of the OSI model. So that is a switch network. So the main points that we identified is that we want to make these networks in a hierarchical manner. So a typical arrangement would be access layer. So these are the switches that are connecting to the users, so the end nodes or users. Then a distribution layer that is going to connect a number of these access layer switches, and then a core layer that is going to stay at the top, and this is the one that will connect outwards to other networks. So what we would do is we would locate the access switches or edge switches closer to the users, because in most Ethernet applications we will have a limitation in terms of how far we can have these wired connections go. So in a typical sort of Cat5, if we are doing Cat5 cabling, we can only go up to say 100 meters. So with distribution switches, we would normally place them closer to sort of building entry points, or like per floor of the building, or normally one per building. And then the access switches, we will place them closer to the user. So maybe if it is a laboratory, maybe we'll have one switch per laboratory or one switch per a particular room or an office, and then or even like a flow of the office, and then we can connect all of them together into a single distribution switch. So when we think about some of the things that we would want to do and we would want to avoid, is the first thing is minimizing the distance or path in terms of how many switches the network traffic has to pass through. So for example, in the first one, a network traffic originating from this switch will have to pass through this one, then this one, and then this one, and then going outwards. So what this would mean is, if for some reason this switch fails, now both this and this switches, they also are going to fail, because their connectivity was through this single switch. So ideally what we would want to do is, we would want to build that in a hierarchical manner, so that all of them are connected to sort of a higher level switch at the next level. So that's what you would want to avoid, is avoid having connections through multiple elements, so that if one of them fails, all of the network connectivity is going to fail. So we would prefer sort of a hierarchical type of connectivity. Then another thing that we would want to do is to build them incrementally. So that is, so we build, say, we start a small organization, we start as a small business, for example, at only located in a one floor of the building. So there we can have a number of hosts connected to a single switch, and that is connected onwards to something else. So then we can have that build further. So now we are adding more and more switches or more and more flows into the building. So now what we can do is we can connect that into a number of other similar switches into a common aggregate or distribution switch. Then similarly we can keep on increasing that further and further in terms of the size of the network. So instead of connecting, say for example, everything into a single switch, that would not be practical, or having that type of flat architecture is also not ideal. So we would want to build something in a more hierarchical manner. So again, that is something that we would prefer to do in layer 2 networks. And when we build these type of hierarchical networks, again we bring in the problem of a single point of failure. Say for example, when we were daisy chaining networks from one to the other, then one failure meant others were also failing. But similarly, if we are also connecting hierarchically, we are creating this single point of failure, and if that fails, again everything is going to fail. So for that reason, what we would do is at the distribution layer, we would duplicate that and create redundancy. So now we have not only one distribution switch, we have two distribution switches. So if one of those switches fails, the other one can still continue to work. So we would prefer to add a layer of redundancy at the distribution layer. So even if all the access switches are connecting to a single distribution switch, if that one fails, the whole network will fail. So at that layer, we need to introduce some level of redundancy in the form of an additional distribution switch. So now we have a level of redundancy there. And the problem of daisy chaining or problem of connecting these type of multiple networks, particularly daisy chaining from like say a midpoint of a network to like this, is not ideal. So it's not something that we should be doing. So because it may be easier to connect, say for example, this switch may be located closer to the other switch in the other building, so it may be easier to connect these two because we can do it with a shorter cable run, but that is not an ideal way to do it. So what we would prefer to do is we could connect all of them to a common distribution switch that is in a central building. Say if all the buildings have a set of switches, even though these two buildings are located next to each other, we would still want to connect it to the central switch so that the connectivity is much more centrally managed. So again, that is something that we would want to ensure as well, even when we are connecting multiple buildings together. Then when we think about different switches, this is something that you may have already covered previously as well, that we may come across few different types of switches. So the first type is the unmanaged switches, or these are the switches that we cannot particularly configure. There's no configuration for these switches. They would basically work in the standard switching protocol based on the MAC addresses, and it is a plug and play type of mechanism. So you connect your devices to the switch, and it will automatically manage or automatically connect to all these devices and do the switching automatically. There's no configuration, no management happening from an administration point of view. The problem is we cannot use them in a sort of an advanced network configuration because they are useful in sort of a small business application or sort of not a complicated setup. So without VLANs and such that we can use these switches. So for example, a home or a small business application, this may be okay. But in other applications, we would want to have additional configurations in our switches. So such switches, we would identify them as managed switches. So the main difference between managed switches and unmanaged switches is, with managed switches, we would be able to, as administrators, go into them and configure a number of things. So these switches will have certain, they will support a number of protocols to do these things, such as SNMP or Simple Network Management Protocol, or syslog, and like various protocols that can be used to manage networks, manage or configure networks. And some features that may be found in many sort of managed switches are the ability to manage VLANs. So how we can virtually segment networks into virtual networks. We will discuss about VLANs and a lot of these topics in the upcoming lectures in this course, like prioritizing between different types of traffic among all the nodes that are connected. Say for example, if we have like 100 different computers connecting, but we may want to prioritize some of them because they carry higher priority traffic, so we may use quality of service for that. When we are building these redundant pathways and redundant components in our network, we may have to use some additional protocols such as spanning tree protocols and such. And we may use things like multicast control or port mirroring. So again, these are some things that we will go into discussing later on in the course. But these are the type of things that we would expect these managed switches to support. Then we have another type of switches that we identify as layer 3 switches. So here the difference is, typically switching is normally we assume that it happens at layer 2. So that is by MAC address, and that is the layer that we normally do switching. But there are certain switches that have the capability of understanding or functioning at the layer 3 level. So with these switches, they can connect between different networks, because layer 3 addresses are the ones that are particularly specifying the network. So the networks are defined by the IP addresses. So only by knowing the network addresses we can connect across different networks. So again, when we discuss about VLANs, what we would do is we would create virtual networks of the devices that are physically existing in the same space, but they belong to different networks from the point of view of networking. So like a VLAN for different parts of the organization. So instead of all this traffic going up to the router and coming back, because only the router will able to understand different networks, if this switch in between can understand these network addresses, then that traffic can only flow through that. There's no need to crowd up that part of the network connecting to the router. So for those purposes, we may use layer 3 switches. So particularly when we need network connectivity across networks, or particularly across virtual networks, we may use layer 3 switches. Again, we will discuss about this in a bit more detail when we are discussing VLANs next week. So now let's go into some basic configurations that we can do in switches. So the most sort of advanced features that we identified, such as VLANs and quality of service and so on, we will be discussing about those in the upcoming lectures. But today we are going to be mainly focusing on some basic configurations about that can be done in switches, and some troubleshooting and some other related issues when we may encounter when configuring switches. So the first thing is, even before configuring, one thing that we may observe in switches is, even by looking at the switches, we may be able to identify certain things based on how the indicator lights are lighting up. So in most switches, there's a standard way of lighting up these lights. So there will be set of LED lights that you may find in front of the switches. Most of the time, one per port will be available, and based on the light that is indicated there, you will be able to see, you will be able to get an idea what is happening with that particular port or connection. So again, this the color scheme is normally standard, or normally like standard across most switches, but it may differ from certain manufacturers to manufacturer in terms of how they may be implemented. But sort of the common thing is, if it is green, the link is available and it is working. For example, if it is amber, then it is currently in the process of connecting or establishing a connection. So if it is green and amber, alternating between green and amber, then it is something wrong with that connection. So there's maybe particular misconfiguration of the port or something like that. So these are some things that you can identify from a physical look at the switch. So even before going into the configuration interface of the switches, we can easily identify some of these issues of switches just by looking at them. So first, when we think about configuring switches, the first thing that would happen in terms of configuration is, when we switch on a switch, so when we power on a switch, what happens is the switch will go through a process called post, or power on self test. So it will go, and so there will be a program that will be located in the ROM of that device, and it will execute that program and go and check the various hardware components of the device to see if that device can start up and function properly. So that is like a self test, it will perform normally. Then after that, it will load the bootloader, because it is, as with any sort of computer, any sort of computing device, it has to load a bootloader that will run the key parts of that operating system, for example. So then that will load the iOS or the operating system of the switch. Then that will initiate the interfaces. So at that point only, it will go and initiate the various interfaces and establish connections, learn about MAC addresses and so on. So then it will go through that process. So when we look at sort of the standard command line, or like the command that we may want to, if we want to force a boot, or when we want to issue a boot command, what we can do is, we can normally specify the image that we want to boot, for example, that may be located in the switch, and we may be able to boot issue that boot command to manually boot. So normally this may happen automatically, but if for some reason we are restarting it, or we are going into the switch configuration and we have made certain changes and we are rebooting it, or we are booting it manually, we may issue this command. So we have to specify where that file is located and specify the path to the file, and we can issue the boot system command to do the initial booting of the switch. So another scenario where we may want to configure switches is when we are, say, recovering from a system crash. Say a switch has encountered some critical issues and it has failed, and we have to go and verify that and check and fix that issue. So in such a situation, what we would do is, most switches will have what is called a console port. So a console port is normally a connection point through which we can connect for the purposes of managing that device. So what we may be able to do is, we may be able to connect to that device through the console port, and then we can connect to the switch directly through the configuration terminal, for example, whatever the particular device that we have in terms of application we have in terms of configuring, we can go to the configuration terminal, and then we can issue a number of commands at the bootloader. And for example, if the iOS is not loading, if the operating system of the switch is not loading, but we can load up to the bootloader, we may be able to go and issue the boot system command and start up the operating system there. Or maybe we can manually edit some configurations and so on. So that could also be possible. So again, that is another scenario where we may want to do some level of configuration in these switches. So one of the things that we have to remember about configuring switches is, there are two ways that we can configure switches. So when we are configuring routers will always have a gateway address. We can directly connect to that gateway and configure. So normally that is the router's IP address. We can connect to that router's IP address and configure. But for switches, it is not necessary for a switch to have an IP address, because by default switches don't, nobody will contact a switch. The duty of a switch is getting packets from one end of the network and forwarding it the other way around. So there's no need for any entity to actually communicate with the switch. So for that reason, switches typically don't need to have an IP address, because nobody need to communicate with that, so they don't need an IP address. But for the purposes of configuration, what we can have is, we can additionally assign an IP address to a switch for its management component. So the switch management component can have an IP address through which it can be reached. So when we think about configuring these switches, we can either connect through a console cable, so that is like a direct cable connection that we will connect to the switch, and then we can configure that way, or we can assign an IP address to the switch, and then we can connect it through the router. So between these two approaches, sometimes connecting through a console cable is easy, because you can always connect it that way. The disadvantage is, depending on where the switch is located, it may not always be practical. Say if the switch is located at a very higher up location or very far away location, that type of a thing, connecting to the switch physically may be not convenient. So in those cases, it may be advantageous to have a IP based configuration, or connecting through the IP and configuring. And in most cases, what we would do is, when we have this switch configuration assigned in an IP network, we may put them in a separate virtual LAN. So all the this configuration or management network, we would put them in a management VLAN. So only connectivity related to management of network devices will happen through that. So anyone who doesn't belong to that network, so except for the administrators and so on, they don't need to belong to the management network, and they don't have to communicate with these devices. So when we think about configuring a switch for management access, so now what we are doing is, we are going into the switch and configuring the switch to give it management access from an IP point of view. So we are assigning an IP address to the switch itself. So to do that, we will do few things. So we will go into configuration, and then we would specify a VLAN. So the management VLAN, we will specify the management VLAN, which is what we are configuring. Then we can go and assign an IP address very similar to how we would assign IP address to any other device. So we would specify the IP address and the net mask, subnet mask. So then by issuing the no shutdown command, we would enable that interface. So by issuing the no shutdown command, this configured interface would be enabled. So now it can be used. So then we can also specify a default gateway to the switch, so that it will reach to the particular router. So if there is a router that is functioning as the default gateway, we will have to specify that also to the switch. So the management VLAN related traffic will be normally forwarded to that router, from which whoever the administrator or anyone connecting to that switch can communicate to the switch. Then we can also do this part, that is copying running configuration to startup configuration. So running configuration is the current configuration. So we go into the configuration mode and we issue a number of commands. So all the commands that we are issuing will go and impact or go and change what is called the running configuration. So it is a loaded configuration file. It will only change that. So if suddenly power goes off, that temporary configuration file will be erased. It will get erased, and again it will go and load the saved configuration file. So if we want our configurations to be permanent, we have to copy the running configuration file into the startup configuration file. So startup configuration is the permanently saved configuration. So once we have configured the switch itself, now we can go into configuring the various ports of the switch. So in a switch now we have configured the switch management interface, so we can connect to the switch from remotely through an IP network, so there's no need for direct connection. Then regardless of how we are connecting, whether we are connecting from a direct console cable or from an IP connection, the next thing that we'll have to do is configuring the various ports that are available in the switch. So when we think about configuring the ports, there are a number of things that can be configured because these connections in Ethernet switches can come from different devices. Say, for example, you may be able to connect a printer, you may be able to connect a computer, you may be able to connect a server computer. So, the different type of devices can be connected to these ports, and those devices can have different networking capabilities. So, when we think about Ethernet, for example, Ethernet supports a number of variety of communication modes. So it will support number of speeds, for example, and it will also support number of communication modes in terms of whether it is a half duplex or a full duplex connection. So whether it is a bidirectional or a one directional connection. So these things will have to be configured for each port particularly. So for example, if we connect a device that normally supports say 100 Mbps connection, we have to specify and configure at both ends of that link. So if the computer also needs to be configured as a 100 Mbps connection, the same thing also need to match at the switch end. Similarly, if we have a route, another switch that we are connecting to, these two devices should match whether it is a gigabit connection and a gigabit connection if both the devices are supporting that. So to configure that, we can actually, what we can do is we can issue whether say we can specify whether it's a go into a particular interface. So we can go into say the fast Ethernet 1 port, and then we can go and say it's a duplex full speed 100. That is the configuration that we are giving there. And once we have configured, we can go and see the show interface command to see if our configurations have applied correctly. And at the end, we can, as always, save the configuration to the startup configuration. So this is when we are manually connecting devices into the switch port, and we want to manually change the properties of each of the connection. So a connection coming from a computer, we want to configure its speed as 100. Then when a connection coming from another switch, we may want to configure its speed as 1000. So these are speed, because we want to match the speed at both ends of the devices. So if these two devices are connecting, we would want to ensure this connection and this connection at both ends are configured similarly, whether both are full duplex, both are matching speeds. So we want to ensure that, and that's what we would do by configuring individual ports. Then some ports, or rather most ports, most switches these days have a capability of doing that configuration of links or configuring the properties of links automatically. So it is called auto MDIX, or the basic thing it would do is it would identify the speed of both the links or both ends of a link, and also to identify whether it is a duplex or a half duplex connection, and also identifying whether it is a direct connection or a crossover connection. So if we will use crossover connections when we are directly connecting two PCs. We would want to use without a switch. So if we have two PCs and we are directly connecting them, we would normally use a crossover cable or crossover connection. So again, these are some things the switch can configure itself. So to do that, again, what we would do is we will go into the interface and we would set all of these things into auto. So when we set them into auto, it will go into the auto MDIX mode, and all these things will be automatically negotiated with the other end, the device at the other end of the link, and both the ports will be automatically configured. So once we have established the basic port level configuration, then we may want to go into uh, verifying the configurations and to see if those are functioning properly. Or say, for example, if we encounter a situation if something is not functioning properly in a switch, we may again go into the configurations and check to see if everything is okay. So again, there are a number of commands that we can issue for that. Say the show interfaces command will give the details about a particular interface. We can check the saved or the running configuration to see what are the specific configurations that have been configured, and if those are okay. We can use additional commands to know about the underlying, say, uh, um, storage file systems or the software versions, or history of commands that are issued. We can check about the management interface IP configuration, and also one thing that we identified is like switches are going to learn about these MAC addresses of devices that are connected to them, and they are going to create or put them in a MAC address table. So we can directly go and check what is the MAC address table that is being built in a switch and verify if there is any particular issue with that as well. So these are some commands that we may use particularly to verify configurations in a switch and to see if there are any issues with that. Then when we connect to switches, say for example when we issue the show interface command in a switch, what we would encounter there is it would normally present us with this type of a message saying fast ethernet 0/1 is up, line protocol is up. So what we get from that response is two things. It has two parts. One is saying fast ethernet 01 is up, the other one is saying line protocol is up. So the first part is about the physical layer. So that is the physical cable is connected and there is some type of carrier signal. It is detecting a carrier signal being received. So that is the only thing about the first part. It is just the cables are connected and it is detecting some connectivity across that. The second part refers to it has managed to configure some level of layer 2 or the data link layer connection, and it is able to receive what is called the keep alives. So normally when data link connection is established, they normally would send what is called a keep alive message to ensure or to inform that that connectivity is still valid. So that is the two parts that we will see when we go to the show interface command here. So it will identify both the layer 1 status and the layer 2 status. So when we think about some troubleshooting situations, particularly with switches, we can say, for example, what we would start with is we will go with the show interface command and say we will check if the interface is up. If the interface itself is not up, so then that means there's a issue with the physical connectivity. So we may check the cabling to see if the connectors are okay, or sometimes if the speed is properly set at both ends. So if the speed is also not matching, say if one end is configured as 100 and the other is configured as 1000, then these two are not going to match, and that could be a problem. So we will check these about the particular physical interface. So this is about the physical connectivity. If the physical connectivity is okay, the interface is up, then we may have to think about something else. So say if we may sometimes encounter electromagnetic interference or noise in the cabling. So if that cabling is present in an environment that is prone to electromagnetic interference, that can interfere in terms of the information flow through that cable. So we may have to check that. Then we may also have to check the duplex settings, because if the duplex settings is also not properly set, it may not still function even when the interface is up. Then if the problem is not solved even in these two cases, then it is further beyond the functioning of the switch itself. It is not a switch or the network layer issue. If these things are okay, that means the network layer issues are resolved. Then if the connectivity issue is still there, then that may be something else, and we may have to troubleshoot that at a different level. So at this level, we may have to check first if the physical connectivity is up, and then if the duplex settings and so on are okay, and then see if the problem is resolved there. Then another important thing that we have to think about when we are working with switches and when we are configuring switches is how we are connecting to these switches to do our configuration. So normally there are two ways that we can connect to. We can connect through Telnet, for example, and Telnet is basically it's not a secure protocol. It's a plain text protocol, or the passwords and everything will normally be transmitted in plain text. So just by simply capturing the packets on the network, we would be able to normally see what's happening in that network, what's happening in terms of the communication of the network. So it is not advisable, because anyone in your network, especially say for example, if you are only configuring a switch through a direct console cable, if it is a console cable that you are connecting to, you can sort of safely assume that nobody in the network will be able to connect, like see what is going through that console cable. But if you are coming through a router and through a IP network, in that case, anyone that is in that IP network will be able to see what is the information that is there in a Telnet connection. So what we would prefer to do is to use what is called a secure shell or SSH connection. So in SSH, what it has is an encrypted connection. So the connection is encrypted. That is that connectivity from end to end is encrypted. So anyone who is looking through the network traffic from the network will only see encrypted text and will not be able to gather the usernames and passwords from that. So when we want to configure switches in an IP connected network, we would prefer to use secure shell or SSH connections. So if we want to connect to the switch using SSH, what we may have to do is we may have to go into SSH, and we may have to enable we may have to enable SSH, and then we can see how we are how the connection. So we will go into the switch and we will enable SSH, and once it is enabled, we can connect from the PC to that using the SSH command. And then again in the switch we can verify how many users, which users are connected through the SSH and so on. That can also be verified there. Then another aspect of security that we may want to use in our switches is about securing unused ports. So for example, let's say we have a network switch that has say 8 ports, for example. I don't know how many ports. That's 9. So if it has 8 ports, for example, say we are already connecting 4 of those ports in our network. So 4 of these ports are normally used. The others are free. Nothing is connected there. So, and this switch is normally located somewhere. So the problem is, anybody who comes and plugs a device to this port can connect to the network because that is an active port. So what we would want to do is, like, anybody can connect to a physically available port is not a preferable situation, because it may be okay in certain scenarios, but in an organization where we don't want anybody coming into the network unnecessarily or without our knowledge, we would want to do is, we would want to disable these unused ports and say they are not able to be used. So to do that, what we would do is, we would use the shutdown command for each of the interface and say those interfaces are no longer useful or no longer usable. So we will use the shutdown command there, and that will say this port is disabled. So when a port is disabled, even if you plug in a network cable into that port, it will not actively connect that device, because that port itself becomes no longer a valid port. It is no longer until you go and again change that in the configuration. So this is something that we may want to do, particularly from a security point of view, when we want to control who is connecting to our networks and who is not able to connect to our networks. Then another thing that we would want to do in terms of port security, so one is, we will disable the ports that we are not using, so nobody can connect to those. Then another thing that we may want to enable is, we would want to limit how many devices or what are the devices that are allowed in a particular port. So for example, again, if we have a number of ports available and these are occupied, and these other ports we have disabled. So now these 3 ports are actively being used by some network devices. So now, for example, if somebody comes in and says they remove this network cable and plug in their own connection there. So now they may be able to connect to that network again. Still, if they can physically remove a cable and connect their own device can come active in the network. So to avoid that, what we would want to do is, for each port we would set what are the valid MAC addresses. So each port we would say, this port can only connect this particular computer, and that particular computer's MAC address is this, so we would connect that there. So this is another level of security, or another level of port security that we can establish by limiting what are the MAC addresses allowed to connect to a port. So by default, normally we would allow only 1 MAC address per port. And to configure this port security, the MAC addresses for port security, we can again do that in 3 ways. One is, we can go and manually configure them. So we can go into each port's configuration and specify what is the allowed MAC address. We can do what is called dynamically learned. So that is, when a device is first connected to a port, that MAC address will be automatically learned, and then until the switch is restarted, that is the only MAC address that will be allowed. So a switch is active, switched on. Now I connect a computer there. So now the MAC address of that computer is associated with that port. Now if I remove that computer and connect a different computer with a different MAC address, the port will not accept that. It will be rejected because of port security violation. But if the switch is restarted, now I can go and connect this other computer and its MAC address will be associated with the port. So that is dynamic association of MAC addresses. Then there's what is called a sticky MAC address configuration, sticky secure MAC addresses. So they are first dynamically learned. So when I connect a computer, that MAC address is learned and associated with the port, but then it is automatically, or it can be added to the configuration and later can also be saved in the startup configuration, so that even if it is restarted, even if the switch restarts, it is still the same MAC address that is going to be associated with the port. So we can do manual configuration, we can do dynamic learning, or we can do sticky learning. So once we enable this port security in our switches, now we will encounter the situation where at some points port security violations would occur. So you would receive frames that are not belonging to the same MAC address. So the source MAC address will not match that of the port. So the port will be associated with a particular MAC address, and if we receive any data from a different MAC address, we can do three things. We can do protect, restrict, or shut down. So with protect, what we do is the traffic is not forwarded, and the data is just dropped. So nothing happens. It is not forwarded. It will be just discarded. Then in restrict mode, it is still the information will be still dropped, so nothing will happen. It will not be forwarded, but it will present a warning or an error message in the logs. So in syslogs, it will generate an error message, and it will also keep a counter of number of violations, and that will be incremented. So in restrict mode, still the data will be dropped, but it will also create a syslog entry, so that can be revisited later on. In shutdown mode, what it does is it will drop the information again, but when it encounters a port violation, that interface itself becomes disabled. It will shut down that interface permanently. So until it is again re-enabled manually, that interface will be shut down. So what it does is it will permanently disable. So if somebody is, it is in a way to prevent somebody accidentally or like somebody maliciously connecting to these things. So it will automatically shut down the interface. So now you have to go and reset it manually. So these are the typical commands that we may use when we may want to do port security. Say for example, if you want to enable dynamic port security, these are the first set of commands is what we may use. And if you want to do sticky port security, the difference with sticky and dynamic is, in the sticky port security we will have to specify uh, what is the maximum number of addresses that we will allow per port. Um, so it can be 1, it can be 10, so we can specify what is the number that we are going to allow there, and we will specify that it is a sticky port security. So we will either enable port security uh, to enable dynamic port security. If you want to enable sticky port security, we have to go and specify that it is a sticky port security configuration. So that's all that we have to discuss in terms of configuring switches. And today you have a number of packet trace activities associated with this lesson. One is about configuring SSH. So that is something that is needed for any sort of networking configuration. So some understanding of how you can do SSH configurations is really useful. So you will have to do that, and then there are few other configurations of packet trace activities related to configuring port security and so on as well. And then there's one last larger activity, that is sort of connecting a number of activities, a number of these things together into what is called a skills integration challenge. So what the expectation here is to complete all of these activities, because these are particularly important things for you all to know in terms of how these things work. So it is essential that everyone tries all of these things. So I have included all of them as part of the packet tracer activity set for this week. And additionally, on LMS, I have shared some videos as guide in terms of how you can go and work through these packet trace activities. So refer to those videos and work on these packet trace activities. And if you have any questions or if you encounter any problems, please let me know. So are there any questions from today's lesson or anything else? So if there are no other questions, we may conclude for the day. And as always, I would expect the packet trace activities and any other assignment activities to be submitted on time. But if you encounter any problems, if you have any issues in terms of your availability of devices, computers, internet connectivity, and so on, please try to communicate that to me, and so we can find alternative arrangements for your submissions and so on. So other than that, if there's nothing else, we may conclude the lesson for the day. Thank you for joining in. See you next week. Bye.